Hi, welcome to Wetpixel Live. My name's Adam Hanlon, and I'm joined, as I frequently am, by my friend and fellow presenter from down south in the UK, Alex Mustard. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Adam. Nice to see you.
It's a nice top you've got on.
Yeah, well, it's getting cold now, but it's nice. It's been such a mild autumn here in the UK. I've hardly had to wear any wool at all. I think it's been a couple of weeks, but I've generally still been like t-shirts and everything else. So.
Well, it's grim up north, I can tell you that. We're at least 10 degrees colder and blizzards and stuff. No, not yet. I'm kidding. So what we thought we might discuss today is if both Alex and I think the majority of photographers find other people's work very inspirational and often find that competitions and competition results specifically can be a great source of inspiration for us in our own photography. And one of our favourite competitions is the GDT European Photographer of the Year competition, which is an annual competition. And we thought we might have a look at the results of the images that were awarded, I think, a couple of weeks ago. So it's a relatively recent result, and chat through and find out what some of the dissect some of the images, some of the techniques used behind them, so on and so forth. So. Alex, I think the first picture we're looking at is a picture of a sperm whale feeding, sperm whale calf feeding.
Yes. Yeah, I was, as always, going to dodge you for a second or two.
Yeah, of course.
And I just wanted to say that, the website, for those that aren't familiar with the GDT's European Wildlife Photographer of the Year, the website is the GDT photo spelt with an F. So it's GDTFOTO.de because it's a German-based competition. It's very much the German equivalent of the Wildlife Photographer of the Year. But there are a couple of differences. First of all, it's only open to European-based photographers or people who are members of the GDT Society. So right. if you're not from Europe and you want to enter it, you can. You just need to be a member of the GDT Society. And the aim of the competition is to represent, I would say it's a slightly more photographic and artistic contest than the Wildlife Photographer of the Year. The two run at very similar times, and they often have a number of overlapping images awarded in both.
Yep.
Typically, the Wildlife Photographer gets much bigger public acknowledgement, although the GDT contest is well seen in Germany. Yep. And it's certainly, I would say, the Wildlife Photographer is even more amazing in terms of career-wise. But I think in terms of a lot of the photographers who enter both and are successful in both, most of us, or a lot of us, are more excited to see the GDT results because I think artistically they're often more thought-provoking. They definitely have sometimes pictures that you're like, what the hell is that one? Yeah. However, I think that they as a place for inspiration, it's even better than the Wildlife Photographer because the standard of photography and the viewpoint of the judges to look for pictures that are breaking new ground are really good. Yep. Competition has often had quite a difficult relationship with the underwater pictures. Yep. I know for a long time, and when I've been successful in it, they do say that a lot of the underwater photographers, they're not very artistic. They tend to be quite technical shots, and it doesn't necessarily fit with the rest of the competition. And in fact, an underwater picture has only ever been the overall winner in the contest once, which was my picture. And not a normal picture of mine at all. That was, and I think that's kind of a measure that they do see the underwater categories a little bit to the side.
Was that Night Moves, Alex?
Sorry?
Was that Night Moves that won this?
Yeah.
So,
was, 7 years ago now, quite a while ago.
Okay.
But I was, but what I was sort of keen to say is, I definitely, when I look at the results of this competition, I don't just go straight to the underwater category. I definitely really enjoy looking through all the categories and actually tend to get more inspiration from outside of the underwater category. Although today we're going to discuss about the underwater pictures, I'd encourage anyone to look it up on the website, put the website into English, and then go to the photo contest and look up the European Wildlife Photographer of the Year competition, and you'll find these pictures. But don't just look at the underwater pictures. Do look at all the others. They're very inspirational. A lot of my ideas for some of my well-known pictures have come directly from looking at pictures within this competition. So to get back to your question you asked me, the young sperm whale feeding by Mike Korostelev from Russia. And I presume he took this in the Azores. I know Mike's done a lot of photography there with sperm whales. But this is, for me, classic wildlife photography. I don't think you can be, criticized. It captures an amazing moment And that is an important part of photography in a very pleasing composition, showing a behavior that is rarely seen, rarely photographed. And what's great about it is, the whales seem very relaxed with the photographer. The whole thing seems to be taken, in the right way. And I think it's a very nice image. The title's called Whale Milk, and it was the category winner. Yeah. And I think it's a great piece of wildlife photography.
Yeah. Is it? What lens do you think it's shot with, Alex?
No, it's not got loads of bend, so it's basically either a rectilinear or it's a fisheye and it's been cropped quite a bit. Right. My guess would be it's probably a fisheye and it's been cropped, but I don't, because I think if you're going in to see sperm whales, you're probably going to put a fisheye on because you're not going in expecting to see this, and then you get this and then you crop it. Is my guess. Yeah. It may be uncropped, but it doesn't look like it's got a full fisheye bend here.
I think one of the things that I sort of noticed about it is I didn't think I kind of noticed that it wasn't bent, or there wasn't a great deal of distortion. And I think that, I think again, catching big animals, it's actually fairly rare to see imagery that isn't quite fishy, fish-eye. So no, I liked it as a result. I mean, I actually really like the straighter lines on it. Yeah.
It's a really nice picture. I think one thing we should say when we go through these competition results, whenever we do them on Wetpixel Live, there is no real point in us sitting here going, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. These are already international award-winning pictures, and if we don't try and cast some sort of critical eye over them, we're not going to learn. And I think as a photographer, you should always look at images going, what have they done well? What could they do better? And those are the two questions I ask every picture I take, whether it's someone else's picture or whether it's my own picture flashing up on the back of my camera. What's working, what's not working, what can I do better? Right, next up, I think the order of these is actually pretty close to the order that they've put them in. I do think they do rank them into a top 10. I have judged this competition, but it was a few years ago, so I've forgotten. But I do think we do put thought into the order they're in. It's not just, here's the winner and these are the rest. I think we do sort of put them into some sort of order, but I'm not 100% on that. But the second one is Magnus Lundgren's Hitchhiking Octopus. It's a paper nautilus. And this is a nice blackwater shot. And blackwater shots that we discussed in the wildlife photographer episode do appeal very widely. They're graphically strong. They have that otherworldly feeling that you get in a lot of competitions. That attracts them to nature photographers. They love the underwater category to feel alien, otherworldly, and if they're graphically strong as well as blackwater shots are, they tick all those boxes. Personally, I think the blackwater shots in this category are not as strong as the blackwater shots in the wildlife photographer this year. But I have to say, I don't have as much of a, we commented in the wildlife photographer episode that the wildlife photographer has been awarding blackwater shot after blackwater shot. I think in this category, I have no problem with a couple of them being in there. There's a good balance between different subjects in this.
It's a more balanced portfolio, I think.
So it's a nice. So I have no problem at all with the dominant, the blackwater shots in this. Although I actually think they're not as good shots as the ones in the wildlife photographer.
What I like about Magnus's shot, and I think maybe this reflects competition. I think graphically it's quite strong due to the colours. I think the colour palette, often blackwater shots tend to be they're not monochromatic, but they tend to have very few don't have a variety of colours in this shot. And I think the variety of colours in this shot makes it graphically quite strong. To me, the subject is definitely less engaging than the actual the graphic appeal of it. I was going to ask Alex, what's the rules on backscatter for this? Do you know? Is backscatter removal allowed?
It will be. I would. My expectation is it's a no change competition, right? And I would say that they're stricter than the wildlife photographer of the year. On that, which may also be why maybe the blackwater shots are not quite as good. In that I don't think anyone's taking backscatter out, but they may be processing the picture so the backscatter becomes almost invisible. But I know the GDT is very strict on that sort of thing. It's very much has to be as shot. It's very much an in-camera photographic competition. So my issue with this one, I don't want to get bogged down in it. The reason why I didn't think it was as amazing a shot is the eye is such an important part of the picture, and I don't get the eye contact from this particular angle. And it just feels to me that if the photographer was moved a little bit more around to the right, you would have all the same graphic elements and strong eye contact as well. But maybe the judges, I don't, not so familiar with the subject, maybe they actually kind of liked it and they thought maybe it was even one animal, because often judges judging something like this, they don't really know what it is. They just think it's amazing. No. So, right, next one is Jacob Diggy's crocodile impression, which I presume is a Cuba shot. I think Jacob's been to Cuba. And I really like this because there's no doubt when you see crocodiles underwater, you think, wow, this is an amazing subject. Yeah. And it's very, very difficult to do anything different with them.
Yeah.
And what I like about this shot is Jacob has really gone to town on being different.
Yeah.
And, it looks to me like, it's not just a mistake shot. I say that not a bit tongue in cheek, but sometimes with some of the more creative categories in nature photography competitions, you kind of go, well, did the photographer do that on purpose, or did they just like it after the event?
Yeah.
But this one, the sharpness of the teeth in the middle, and then the really amazing impressionist colors around it. For me, I think they're very much done on purpose, and I think it's a really great way of trying to be different with a subject that everyone loves, but it's actually hard to do anything different with.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of crocodile shots from Cuba and Banco Chinchorro, and primarily, and they all tend to be about the beast. I mean, they are amazing beasts, so you can see exactly where this comes from. And definitely Jacob in this picture has taken that round and turned it around into something. It's not really about the beast; it's about an impression. It's very impressionistic, I think.
And it's a really good reminder that when you've got these great subjects, not just to keep striving for that one type of image, but to think, what else can I do differently? What else can I try to create something original and unique? And
with big animals, that's actually, that is quite rare. The majority of the time, we shoot pictures of the big animal rather than thinking creatively with them. Yeah. Yeah.
Especially when there's all these teeth looking at you. It takes a lot to think creatively at that point. Right. The next one is by a photographer I don't know from Austria called Kai Kolodziejczyn. I'm struggling with that name. I haven't practiced
Kai.
it. So. But this picture I've seen awarded in quite a few nature photography competitions across Europe over the last year or two. I think it's got a tremendous atmosphere and feeling. It's got that otherworldly feel to it that I think a lot of land photographers really like in underwater pictures.
Yeah.
I have heard talk that shots like this, I'm not saying this particular one, but when I judged the wildlife photographer, we awarded a shot that was like this, but much more perfect, as in crystal clear water, amazing newt. And actually that these shots are done by having an aquarium, a thin aquarium with the subject in, and the photographer lies dry on the ground below it and shoots the trees through it. I don't think that's the case in this particular picture, but I was just saying that. And I know we were criticised afterwards in the wildlife photographers. People were saying they suspected that picture might be that way, and it was never resolved. But just out of interest, this feels much more naturalistic looking.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And I think the angle of the picture suggests it's natural. But I love how the frog looks in this picture. It's the atmosphere. It shows that it's not capturing this feeling of another world. Doesn't require crystal clear water. Doesn't require travel around the world. So really nice. What about you, Anne?
Your local pond. Yep. Yep.
I know you like the title Vitruvian Frog.
Yeah, it does. I get the whole Vitruvian Man thing out of it. Obviously Leonardo da Vinci's famous sketch, and I kind of get that from it. I can see how he's gone with that. I would be really interested to chat to the photographer to discover what he planned to do here, whether this happened as a happy circumstance or whether he sat down and planned this one out. It could go either way. It may well be a really well planned shot. Equally, it could also be one that just sort of happened. Either way.
Well, it is quite common. I'm not again, don't want to talk specifically about this photo in this, but it is very common with amphibian photography on land that it's very normal for amphibian photographers when they photograph their subjects on land to move the subject for a photo and put it back afterwards, and that's widely accepted in their way of shooting that. We obviously as underwater photographers would find that very appalling. It's actually very common in land amphibian photography because often frogs and toads are hiding underneath undergrowth You know, if you want to find toads, you don't look in the water. You go and look under, wet vegetation, and you turn it over and you find them. And people then find them, take them out, take a photo, put them back. And that's kind of quite a normal way of operating. Anyway, let's move on. Next up is Nicholas Moore with Fish Explosion. Picture taken at Four Kings in Raja Ampat. I was diving with Nick when he took this picture. So I think this picture has appealed to the judges because, again, it strikes that amazing other world. You don't see something like this on land. I know I realize you don't see fish on land, but kind of landscape photographers are used to kind of, land nature photographers are used to kind of bird on a stick. So if we have a portrait of a fish on a reef, that kind of feels normal to them. Whereas just this incredible density of life, really blows them away. And then if you can add there's some lovely textures coming in this from the long exposure. It just adds an extra element to this shot that makes it a little bit more special still.
And the colours coming through behind the reef as well. It's And
it's one of those shots that at first glance you're like, yeah, it's really nice, and then you just start looking at it in detail, and just the perfection of the exposure and the perfection of the position of every single fish. It feels like a magic moment, which I think is part of its appeal. And the funny thing is, there was, we were all on, running a workshop. There's lots of us on this dive. Lots of this was at Four Kings. It was completely covered in these cardinal fish on that day. The whole reef was, and we were all shooting them. And lots of people took pictures of this exact opening in the reef. It's as you go from king number 1 to king number 2. There's that cave, and at the time, none of us were particularly excited about it. And it's one of the things that can often happen on a trip is when a lot of you shoot the same thing, and maybe you don't all shoot it equally well, but you can often undervalue the shot because you think, oh, everyone's got that on the trip. But what you forget is when you get back to the real world, hardly anyone's got that shot, and it can become a really special picture.
And I think, it's actually quite a simple picture. It's not terribly contrived. Yes, Nick's execution's brilliant with the slow shutter speed, which obviously is part of the technique, and he's worked that really well. But it's actually not a complicated picture. There's no trickery here. There's no clever technology particularly. It's just simply just a question of a well executed image, really.
And appreciating how amazing this subject matter can be, particularly to people that maybe are not so familiar with our world. Which I think is a big part of doing well in these competitions.
I was going to say, really, really good choice for the competition.
Right. Next up is Cristobal Serrano's photo called Hullabaloo of a iguana feeding in Galapagos. And I think Cristobal is a very successful nature photographer. Does underwater photography, does land photography. I think a couple of years ago he won 2 categories in 1 year in the wildlife photographer with his drone photography. He was also overall winner of Nature's Best that year and lots of competitions. And I think he is somebody who really understands these contests in terms of what to choose and what to enter. And I think this shot is, iguanas are, marine iguanas are an amazing species that are always going to have an appeal in this type of competition. But a lot of the shots are quite similar. And I think what he's done here by having all these fish in and this kind of melee of activity, it strikes some of the same chords of Nick's picture of this just incredible energy of life underwater, but at the same time has that A-lister subject in it. And for me, this is a great lesson in choosing a picture. If you sent this picture to a dive magazine to tell to illustrate an article on Galapagos, they're not going to publish it.
No.
But it's about, finding an image for the right use. And for a nature photography competition, looking to show a charismatic species in a fresh interpretation, I think this is a great image for that.
I think there's a lot, again, for the sort of the more nature-oriented competitions as opposed to the underwater-oriented. There's a lot to be said for putting iconic subjects in their environment. It's a very, very charismatic, iconic subject, but he's placed it neatly within an environment that's immediately recognizable. And I think sometimes the problem with things like marine iguanas is there's lots of beautifully shot portraits of marine iguanas, but actually it's quite hard to make out they're underwater. They almost look like they're posing on land, and there's no doubt that a marine iguana surrounded by fish is underwater, and I think it helps give it context. It gives the image context, which I think
makes it look like an alien in their world, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Which they sort of are, aren't they? Sort of. Yeah.
So I think that I can see exactly why it's appealed. Although for me, it's not it's not a picture that I'm overly like myself, right? Next up is Magnus Lundgren's Big Race in the Pink, which is a salmon run picture. It's for me, very eye-catching, very in-your-face picture. You've got a nice big male there with his hook jaw and his teeth and his eye contact, and then you've got this energy around him, which I think gives a real feeling. Freshwater pictures tend to do much better in nature photography competitions than tropical pictures. It's quite rare that sort of coral reef pictures do well. I think Nick's shot is a rare example of that. For me, this is a very nice salmon shot, but I have to say it looks very like a lot of salmon shots I've seen before. If you follow any photographers who do this type of photography, they've all got a lot of shots that look like this. So it's I can see why it's appealed. There's nothing in the picture that I don't like. I like the picture, but it's not a picture that I go away going, wow, I've never seen a salmon shot like that. All salmon shots look like this.
I think creatively, though, he's done a good job of shooting it, because he's obviously used rear curtain sync. There's a bit of motion blur going in the background, which helps to give that sort of feeling of energy to it.
They all have that because it's dark. All these long exposure salmon shots.
But I think that the combination of freezing the action with the rear curtain sync and the bit of blur in the background, I think it does give it some dynamic energy. I'm not saying it's unique, but I think it is.
And I agree with you. Shot. I think you're putting it very well in that it's a very, very nice shot. It stands side by side with all these pictures here very well. I think if you've seen a lot of freshwater photography, there's nothing you haven't seen before here, which is I think a pity in a big competition, and it just maybe reflects judges that are not so familiar with this type of photography.
Sure.
Next up, it's Henley Spears' Constellation of Eagle Rays. And we awarded this at the beginning of the year in UPY, so obviously I like the shot. This is the the one without the backscatter removed, because it's got to get through this competition. I think this is it's a great encounter with really cool subjects. For me, though, it does feel like a picture that's created in post, as opposed to one that was really anything special in the moment or in the capture. It's a great group of eagle rays photographed from above. Eagle rays are usually quite relaxed about you swimming above them like this. The number of eagle rays is pretty cool, and I do really love the different colors of them. So I really love the final result, but it feels like a picture that the photographer has taken a pretty standard underwater photo. Probably was very blue as a color shot, and with good processing has found a really great a black and white image that has we awarded right at the top in UPY, and probably it would have finished higher here, but I'm sure the judges had seen the UPY results at the beginning of the year and were probably a little bit against it. So I do think it's a very beautiful picture.
Yeah, I agree. Graphically, it's beautiful, and I agree with your comments. I'm sure that if you were to look at the raw file for this, and there's no reason why you would, but it's probably a fairly mundane shot, beyond the fact that the rays are beautifully posed, and he's captured the moment when they're all in the right place, which is in itself, an achievement. But then the execution of the post processing has created the beauty on this, and it is beautiful.
It is beautiful. Yeah, one thing I would say is that in most of these wildlife competitions, the post-processing check is done not done by the judges. It's done by a technical person on the panel. So as a judge, when you're judging these things, you basically just get a ticker across, as in this picture's passed, this picture hasn't. So the judges very rarely will see an original raw file. And I do think quite often, actually, in a judging panel, if judges did, they would probably change their opinion on quite a few shots.
Yeah.
But actually, they just get this tickle pass. So if it passes the criteria, it comes through, and then they just judge the final image. They don't ever see the original raw file and go, "Wow, that's changed a huge amount." They just go, "This is past our rules, therefore we judge the final image."
Which I don't think it's a bad thing. I think you should judge on the image that's entered. So
absolutely, but I think if you're choosing pictures to enter, remember that as long as you can pass the raw file test, then you don't need to worry that your raw file looks nothing like your finished picture.
Yeah. Good advice. Yeah.
And then I think this is is it the last one? This is Greg Leclerc's Icy Mobile Home, which was our overall winner.
Two more.
Our overall winner in UPY. And I think this is an amazing piece of nature photography.
Yep.
It's picked up lots of awards since UPY.
Yep.
I think it would have challenged here for category win quite comfortably had it not been around the block a bit before this competition came up. And I'm very grateful that Greg entered it in our competition first. Yep. But it's I think it's a fantastic piece of photography. I think it's amazing scenes of rarely photographed subject matter, both the iceberg and the crab eater seals. Yep. And then the interaction of 4 individuals so well balanced through the picture. You know, it's a great picture, and I really like it.
And it's very, very skillfully shot too. Quite.
It's clean and sharp, and
managing to get all the animals completely sharp. The detail in the iceberg, the whole thing. Yeah, it's very nice.
Yeah. And then our final picture is from Pietro Formis, called Relations. Yep. It's another nice blackwater shot, and showing a bumper, one of these the Portuguese man of war fish, I think they are, inside this jelly, living inside this jelly, having a similar relationship with the jellyfish that the anemone fish have, in able to live in the avoid the stings. I presume that's what's going on. It's a nice blackwater shot showing the relationship. Again, I have seen the odd jellyfish with fish blackwater shots. It's not as strong a shot as the shot from the wildlife photographer, which is so graphic with that purple orb with the fish inside. But there's little you can fault in this shot.
I think for me, I think that the color palette on it is quite bland, which is obviously reflects the colours that the subjects were. So for me, if I compare this to Magnus's Paper Nautilus shot, where I got the sort of the graphic element from the colours in it, I don't really get that from this. It strikes me as, it's well shot, it's beautifully shot, the subject is captured as exactly as it should be, but it doesn't give me that kind of punch, wow kind of thing that I get from Magnus's Paper Nautilus shot. And I think maybe that's just a colour thing. I think
it's an interesting thing to talk about, though. But I do think that the nature photographers, they quite like muted colours. They do a lot of mountain and polar photography with very limited colour palettes. And these competitions are generally judged by those photographers. Whereas underwater photographers, we dive in these incredibly colourful environments sometimes. And I think actually often one of the reasons coral reef shots tend not to do well in these competitions is they seem so gaudy that they can't be artistic. And I actually do think these slightly more muted color images, if you look at the collection of the 10 winners here, they're all pretty muted in tone.
It's interesting.
And so I think that those types of images can do well in these competitions. All that said, you should always enter these competitions with what you feel is your best work, not what fits the contest. But I think the more education you can get from looking at these pictures, it can help you choose pictures from your favorites that maybe are more likely to be successful than not.
No, I think absolutely it's very helpful to review these things, and I think it's good for inspiration in general. Even if you're not planning to enter competitions, it's a great way of looking at how people have shot subjects and trying to either emulate them or not, depending on how you view them. Alex mentioned earlier that he won this competition with an image that was called Night Moves, and I'm sure if you haven't seen it, you should go onto Alex's website and have a look for it, because it's a stunning image. If they search Night Moves, will they find it?
No, I don't know where it is. I don't think it's in my. It's not in my stock sales. I don't think so. It's not on there. I'm sure if you type night moves into the internet, you'll find it.
Type Alex Mustard.
Probably with
night
Alex
moves.
Mustard as well. You might get all sorts.
Otherwise you could end up anywhere. Type Alex Mustard night moves. It's a stunning image, and again, I think it's a really good way of exactly what Alex has been talking about here. This idea of taking a relatively simple subject, something we've probably seen on most night dives, and creating an image that was appreciated by a wildlife photography jury. So
and I would like, just to re-emphasize what we said at the beginning, that there's no point in us doing these reviews of competitions and just going great. And I know the feedback we got from the wildlife photography, people really enjoyed us, taking both positives and negatives from the pictures. And obviously, most of the pictures here we'd all give our eye teeth to have taken them.
Sure.
But it doesn't mean we can't be critical of them, and these things aren't worth watching if we just sit here going, that's great. So.
Yeah, quite agree. No, that's fine. So thank you, Alex. I'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, which is Inon, or Inon if you're in the States. Please feel free to add your comments about these images to the comment section below, and drop us a like if you enjoyed the episode. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you again soon.